Okay, so you've all seen the film. So what's the first rule of Wild Camping Club? You do not talk about Wild Camping Club. Okay, so wild camping isn't quite Fight Club. And between you and me, Brad Pitt is definitely no Messner. But there are some unwritten rules and some codes of conduct that we should all be following when we're going out wild camping. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you my interpretation of how we should be behaving when we go out wild camping in the UK. So as you probably know, wild camping isn't something that we have the God-given right to do in this country. But it is usually tolerated if we follow a certain etiquette and a certain set of behaviours. I'm not going to get into all of the legalities of wild camping in the UK. I have done a video on it before, so I will link that in the description below, and I'll pop one of those little end screen things on if you're interested in finding out more about that. So rule number one, it's all about preparation really. You should prepare your route in advance and try and have some kind of idea of where you're going to camp. It's a really good idea to tell one of your friends or your loved ones where you're going to be going and what your plans are and when they can expect to hear from you again. That way, if something doesn't go to plan, they can call for the cavalry to come and rescue you, and they know roughly where you're going to be. Rule number two, make sure that you're prepared and you've got the right gear for the trip. So that means ensuring that you're wearing the correct clothing and you've got the right equipment, such as sleeping bags, for the conditions that you're going to be hiking in or camping in. This will not only make your camping experience more comfortable, but it'll also reduce the risk of having to call the emergency services, in case you get struck down with hypothermia or something, because you're too cold and you haven't got the right equipment for the job. So rule number three, so you found somewhere that you want to pitch your tent, so you need to be arriving later on in the day. And don't start pitching your tent at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I tend to wait till half an hour or an hour before sunset and make sure that everybody's left the area before I think about setting up. That way you are more unlikely to bump into anybody up on the hills, and especially landowners and wardens and things like that may ask you to move on. The same thing applies for the following morning. Get up early, get your stuff packed away and get off the hill. Don't be hanging around all day. You should only really be spending the minimum amount of time with all your kit set up in the hills and mountains. So rule number four, try and avoid visual disturbance as much as possible. So that means you don't want to be setting up a disco and having lights flashing. You don't need a headlamp that's 1,000 lumens or anything like that. Be as discreet as possible. You don't want to be lit up like a lighthouse and have all the ships coming in. Wild camping is about being discreet and just enjoying your environment. My rule number five is be considerate to landowners. A lot of landowners, especially in areas like the Lake District, are very tolerant of wild campers. As long as you look after the area, you don't leave any sort of mess, and you pitch up late and you leave early. They don't even know you've been. The chances are that you've not asked their permission to camp there, so if they do come and ask you to move, then be polite and be apologetic, and if they're really insistent, then leave. But if you're really polite and not causing any mess, noise or harm, then 9 times out of 10 they'll probably let you leave in the morning. Rule number 6, be considerate to other wild campers and hikers. You're not the only one that wants to get up there and enjoy the beautiful countryside. So if someone's got their tent pitched in the perfect spot, don't rock up at the side of them. Go and find yourself somewhere out of the way and allow them their peace and their privacy to enjoy the views just like you want to do. Rule number 7, keep the noise down. So if you want to have parties and loud music, then go and take your tent to Glastonbury and do it there. Don't take your ghetto blaster up Helvellyn and start having a disco. It's not good for the environment, the wildlife, and people just don't want to hear that kind of racket up there. Rule number 8, you want to be camping as high up in the hills as possible. You don't want to be camping lower down near farmland or lodgings or anything like that. The last thing that a farmer wants is to look out of his window and see your tent overlooking his back garden. The general rule of thumb is to pitch up above the highest fell wall. Now, I've been asked this question before. The fell wall is just a wall basically that separates, segments of the land. Usually above that you're getting some open access land where you're able to wander a little bit and find somewhere nice to pitch. Rule number 9, respect the wildlife. So they live there, you're just visiting for the day. Leave all wildlife alone. Don't feed any of the animals or leave food around for them. And be careful where you're pitching up. So I've seen people where they're pitched on islands and stuff like that, and there's birds that aren't able to go back to their nests to sit on their eggs because there's like people in the way. Also in some of the crags there may be rare birds such as peregrines or red kites, so you just need to be wary that you don't disturb any of those. The same goes for cows and sheep and things like that, and be wary of the bull in the field. Especially if there's young animals around, they're very protective and they can be tempted to charge you. You don't want them tearing down your brand new tent, do you? Rule number 10, at some point you're going to need to go to the toilet. So be very wary where you do this. Do it at least 50 metres away from your camp, any footpath or any water source. If you need to deposit any solids, then make sure that you take a trowel with you and dig a hole at least 6 inches deep and cover your waist over with the soil that you've dug up. Do not bury your toilet paper or wipes or anything like that. They go in a plastic bag and they go home with you into your own waste stream. Rule number 11, if you carried it in with you, take it away with you. That includes things like orange peels and banana skins, wipes and toilet roll. I read somewhere that up on Ben Nevis, in 2 days they managed to take away 8 kilos of used banana skins. That's just ridiculous, and they actually take months to decompose. Everyone thinks that they're biodegradable, but take them home with you and treat them like you would treat rubbish at home and put them in the bin. Rule number 12, if you're cooking, then you use a stove. Campfires are not welcomed up in the hills and the mountains in the Peak District or the Lake District. Now if you're in a private woodland and you've got permission to light a fire, it's a different ball game, but do not light fires up in those areas. Not only do they scar the land, but they can very easily get out of control, and some of these moorland fires can go on for days and days, cause lots of damage and kill lots of wildlife. So campfires are a no-no. Rule number 13, this is the most important one really, just leave no trace. You should only really be taking pictures and videos, and leaving footprints, that's about it. You might have a little bit of flat grass where your tent's been pitched. You don't want to be disturbing the land, chopping down trees or anything like that. Unless you've been given permission to do so in a private woodland, then do not do things like that when generally wild camping. Rule number 14 is a bit of a strange one. If you make videos on wild camping, then you must film yourself walking past the camera and then go and walk back and fetch it again. It's a totally pointless exercise, but we all do it for some reason. So welcome to Wild Camping Club. So now you know the rules. Get out there and sleep under the stars and fall in love with the great outdoors. So if you get hooked on wild camping, then you'll probably want to buy all of the expensive gear, but there's really no need for all of that. As long as your gear's suitable for the situations that you want to camp in, then that's perfectly fine. So if you do fancy going wild camping and you haven't got any gear, then maybe check out some of these videos here. It might give you a few ideas of things that you might need. If I've missed any rules out, then please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in another video.